Hello, and welcome to your second PowerPoint module for this course. This week we're going to talk about social research strategies. And as implied by the topic for this week and the title of your book chapter for this week, this is going to be a more conceptual week, right? We're going to be talking about different ways to frame social research, right? So going beyond our definition and understanding of social research last week, how do we apply theory to social research, for example? And in addition to that, what are some really fundamental ways of thinking about how we come to understand the social world? So again, this is going to be more conceptual, and we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of quantitative research methods in future weeks. Our objectives for this week are to discuss the role of theory in social research, so where it fits into the research process, types of theories that you might apply to your own proposed research. We're going to compare deductive and inductive approaches to research, and you'll know what that means hopefully by the end of this module. And then finally, we're going to define epistemology and ontology. And this is where we get really conceptual and thinking about what research really is. And we're going to discuss how each of these concepts relates to social research. I expect that this module will take you about an hour, maybe a little bit less, but aim for about an hour, schedule about an hour in your time to do this module. Here are your deliverables for this week. So what you need to turn in on Inquire this week. As usual, you have this PowerPoint module, and this is due by Tuesday night at midnight. There are 3 questions to respond to that are embedded throughout the module. So there's an opening question, a content question, and a video question that you'll come across. Turn those in on Inquire. There are no assignments due this Friday, so it's just the module for this week and obviously coming to class. So let's start with our opening question. Your opening question is pretty broad. Here's what I want you to answer on Inquire. What is a theory? Not a social theory necessarily, but what is a theory? I want you to name and briefly describe one example of a theory. This can be something you've gotten from class. This can be something that you've gotten from your general knowledge of the world. Doesn't need to be a social theory. So for example, the Big Bang Theory is a theory. It's just not one we're going to cover in this class, obviously. So you can pause the PowerPoint module here, answer this opening question on Inquire, and then come back for the rest of the module. So let's talk a bit about why we need theory in research, specifically social research. Why is it important? What does it provide us? And in the broadest sense, a theory is a lens that we use to understand something about reality, right? So that's why I had the image here of a lens, right? So you can think about theories as lenses, ways of seeing reality, ways of seeing the world. Every academic field has theories that have been proposed throughout the history of these fields. Physics, for example, has theories. Mathematics, philosophy, history, and I could go on with a number of fields that do have theories as kind of the building blocks of those fields. Some fields do, however, rely on theory more heavily than others, and sociology is one of those areas. We have an extensive array of theoretical frameworks in sociology that are really important to the research process. Now, why are they important? Why do we use theory in the social sciences? I have a few bullet points here. I would say first, theory provides us with a way of understanding or explaining social phenomena that are complicated. So for example, maybe we want to ask why women tend to work in occupations with lower pay compared to men. We could consider theories of gender and power to frame this issue, right? So our theory and the theory that sociologists have built throughout the history of the field, this provides us with a way to frame the social issues that we see today or in the past, right? Theories also, or should also, apply to multiple contexts. That is, they should be generalizable to an extent, and this enables us to understand multiple societal conditions and contexts by applying the same frameworks, right? And then finally, theory provides a way, and I don't think it's thought about in this way as much, but theory provides a way to organize sociology as a field and the social sciences more broadly. We can draw connections across studies that apply the same theoretical perspectives. Or maybe we observe that various studies agree or disagree on certain issues depending on the kinds of frameworks that they apply or the kinds of theories that they develop. So theory is very important in social research, and that's why for your proposals that you write in this class, you are going to be expected to apply a theoretical perspective to what you propose. And we will spend some time in class and throughout the semester working on that and discussing it. Now, an important point to make here before we go any further is that not all theories operate on the same level, right? Theories can operate on a very broad, abstract level, or they can be a bit more specific. And I know this is very general and conceptual. We'll talk more about it in class with some examples. But at the most macro level, the highest level of abstraction, we have grand theories. And these describe a worldview, right? They describe a way of seeing the world, but they're usually not something that you can test, right? You can't test, for example, so folks who are in sociology, you've heard of structural functionalism. You can't really test structural functionalism. You can't say, I'm going to do a study and I'm going to test structural functionalism in schools or something like that. You can't do that because it's too broad. Functionalism is a very broad concept. Now, on the other hand, we have what we call middle range theories. And these theories are still abstract, so we can apply them to multiple research topics, ideally multiple contexts, but it's not specific, or it's not general in the sense that it can't be tested. So middle range theories are specific enough to be tested. They are testable. They do explain more limited components of the social world than a grand theory does. They're in the middle. Here are a couple of examples that you might have heard of in the social sciences, and also assimilation and acculturation theories. This is actually in one of the readings you did for this week, right? And we'll talk about that reading in class. But we could also consider labeling theory as something that's middle range because we can test it. It's still abstract, but specific enough to be tested. I know that it's going to be and it can be a challenge to find theories that really apply to a topic that you're interested in for your proposals. And that's why we're going to spend some time on this throughout the semester. But I do want you to know that you should be able to find a theory that's specific enough that you can really apply it and perhaps even test it in your proposed research. Now, another thing we're going to discuss this week in relation to theory is when in the research process we apply or bring in theory, right? When does theory really take center stage in our research? And there are two different perspectives or two different ways in which we could see our theories fitting into our research. Deductive versus inductive reasoning points out that distinction, right, of different areas where our theory could fit. Deductive reasoning means that we're starting with theory. We're using a theory or a theoretical perspective to shape the research questions and the hypotheses that we have. And then the hypotheses are tested through research, right? So in this way, deductive reasoning is taking a theory and testing it. Right? So we start with a theory, then we get to our actual hypotheses and research process. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, starts with our observations or our findings, and then kind of aggregates those or integrates those into maybe a new theory or a revised theoretical perspective. Right? So we're starting with observations, and then from there we're developing some kind of a theory. We use these kinds of reasoning all the time in our daily lives, right? It's not restricted to thinking about social research. We use deductive reasoning all the time. We use inductive reasoning all the time. We're going to, primarily in quantitative social science research, we're going to be applying a more deductive approach to theory in research. So starting with a theoretical perspective to frame a research topic question and our hypotheses, and then really testing it through our research. That's what is more common in quantitative research. We obviously do some induction as well, right? When you complete a research project and you're trying to interpret your findings within the broader literature, you're using inductive reasoning there. So it isn't so clear-cut as to say quantitative research is all deductive and qualitative research is all inductive. But we do tend to see more deductive reasoning applied within quantitative research. All right, we will talk more about this in class. I know I'm running through a lot of different concepts in this module. We'll talk about those more. So now I want to give you the opportunity to think about how theoretical perspectives or a particular perspective might fit well with the research topics or questions that you're considering for your proposal. All right, so that's your content question. Do you know of any theoretical perspectives that are relevant for your research question or topic? Maybe you do from a previous class or from something you've read, maybe you don't. If you don't know of any theoretical perspectives, none come to mind for your particular topic, how do you plan to identify relevant theories? So I do think that this is a bit of a challenge to find theories that are relevant to a topic that interests you for your proposals. So at this point, pause the PowerPoint module, answer that content question on Inquire, and then come back for the last few slides. The last set of concepts that we're going to go over this week is ontology and epistemology. Again, we're very much in the conceptual realm here. We are going to do examples. We're going to have more discussion in class. I do want to introduce these terms, and you will actually see some examples in the next slide. First, let's talk about ontology. Ontology is fundamentally concerned with what constitutes reality. That is, what is real? Is social reality external to us as social actors, or is it constructed by us? And this fundamentally shapes how we view social reality, which then is the premise to identifying how to study social reality. So to expand on that, those bullet points there. If social entities exist independently of our perceptions of them, that is, let me think of a social entity we could be thinking about here. Poverty. Poverty is one that we're going to talk about in class. So if poverty exists independently of our perceptions of it, it's an objective fact, then we might choose to pursue a particular research strategy that reflects that, right? We might use the poverty level, right, or poverty rates to reflect the existence and extent of poverty. On the other hand, if social reality is in the eye of the beholder, in other words, if social reality is constructed by social actors, then we might try a different research strategy. My idea of poverty and my understanding of it might differ from somebody else. Poverty differs across cultures, across countries, across parts of the world, and so maybe we need to study it in a somewhat different way. All right, so ontology is about what is real. What constitutes reality? It's very, very tied in with epistemology. Epistemology is concerned with what constitutes acceptable knowledge of reality. That is, how can we come to know reality? How do we know what is real? Why is this important to social research? Well, this shapes how we think about the appropriate methods to gain knowledge of reality. Can we objectively measure social entities in our research? Right? So with that example of poverty, that was taking ontology, so what constitutes reality. If we say that poverty is some objective fact that we can observe, then we're going to probably apply a natural sciences research process in order to understand it. That means we assume we can observe it and we can measure it. And we're going to use concrete measurement in order to capture this concept of poverty. On the other hand, maybe we think that individuals interpret poverty or some other concept, some other idea, in different ways, and it is much more interpretive. And so then we can't really use those concrete measures in order to understand poverty. We need to consider how people interpret their social world. We need to consider how people interpret the idea of poverty. So we will go through examples of this. I want you to be able to define these, ontology and epistemology, and consider the ways in which these relate to quantitative research and qualitative research. What kinds of ontological or epistemological perspectives exist within the quantitative research realm, and which perspectives tend to exist within qualitative research? This is in your textbook, and we're also going to do an example in the next slide that will hopefully give you some clarity on how these terms relate to social research. So now you have a video question, and this is expanding on that idea of ontology and epistemology. The two videos I want you to watch are actually from a grad student, Pat Norman. He has a number of YouTube videos on these fundamentals of social research, and I think he does a pretty good job of explaining ontology, epistemology, and then how they relate to the research process. So you have two videos. One is called positivism, and that term was in your book. One is called constructivism, also in your book. These links are on Inquire, so I want you to watch those two videos and then answer this video question. Distinguish between positivism and constructivism. I want you to incorporate both ontological and epistemological perspectives in your response. Which perspective do you think is most prevalent in quantitative research? Which is most prevalent in qualitative research? Right? So I'm asking you to apply a lot of terms here. Do your best with this. If you need some inspiration, you can look at what your peers are putting for this video question on Inquire. But of course, your response should be in your own words and be your own thoughts, right? So you can pause here and watch those videos and answer the video question on Inquire. That actually concludes our PowerPoint module for this week. I know we went over a lot of concepts, and we're going to talk about those concepts a lot more in class. We're going to have a lot of discussion focused on these ideas. All right, so if anything is still fuzzy, I do hope that it will become clearer as we talk about it more. What's coming up soon for you? You don't have any assignments due this Friday. All right, so just coming to class on Wednesday and Friday of this week, no assignments due on Friday. Next week, you have a couple of readings. So you have the next chapter of Bryman, and then you also have an article to read on the reliability of drug users' self-reported HIV risk behaviors. All right, so that's on Inquire for you to read. Next Friday, you do have an assignment. Your research topic is due on Inquire. We talked about it in class on Friday. If you have any questions about the research topic, please do let me know. You can send me an email. We can set up office hours, set up a meeting to talk about it. Your research topic is due next Friday, not this Friday. Right? So that's all I have for you. I will see everybody in class on Wednesday.